This caliber matchup between Tennessee and Vanderbilt has never been seen before. Not only are both teams ranked, they're ranked at the time of the meeting, and Vanderbilt is ranked ahead of the Vols. Even former Tennessee players told me they never thought they'd see this day. So how can the Vols defend home turf and ruin Vandy's playoff hopes? Let's talk about it. I'm Paige Dauer. This is the Sports Page.
I had a little taste of it last year and how hostile it was, and now being at Neyland, I mean, it's gonna be like no other.
This game will likely come down to two things. And the first, it's the secondary. Both quarterbacks in Joey Aguilar and Diego Pavia are pass-happy quarterbacks who are not afraid to push the ball down the field. When we specifically turn our attention to Diego Pavia, he's been on a tear in the month of November specifically. Over the last 3 games across Texas, Auburn, and Kentucky, he has 33 explosive plays for nearly 900 yards. So how does he do that? Well, for Diego Pavia, a lot of it comes down to his ability to extend plays, whether manipulating the pocket, his rollouts. He is able to buy time for his receivers. And we could specifically look to last week against Kentucky. That's why Vandy's receivers were so open down the field. It's because of how Diego Pavia extends plays after the play breaks down. I mean, specifically on the 12 or so explosive plays he had in that game alone, 40% of the yardage came after the catch. So that's what puts the pressure on the secondary for Tennessee. Because of how effective Diego Pavia is and, again, manipulating the pocket, rolling out, his ability to buy time means that the secondary, they have to stay pretty much tattooed on those wide receivers to not give up, these explosive plays, right? Like you could go to basketball and Rick Barnes. How frustrating is it when you guard so perfectly for 29 seconds and you just give up that last second 3-pointer? That is essentially what we might see in this game because of how elusive Diego Pavia is with his legs and how strong his arm is and how connected he is with his wide receivers. Even more specifically in this matchup when it comes to Tennessee's secondary, I think for the most part, Ty Redmond will be in the spotlight. When we look at these games in November for Diego Pavia, majority of those explosive plays, strictly just those 33 explosive plays, are going to the left side of the field. So clearly he has a really good connection with that one wide receiver, and he will exploit where the weakness is on the defenses. And for the beginning of the season for Tennessee, that weakness was the left side. That was Ty Redmond, the true freshman coming in, and it really was trial by fire after Ricky Gibson went down in the first game of the season. And then week 3, get the biggest matchup of the season, essentially, and then, of course, now maybe the second biggest matchup coming here against Vanderbilt. But for Ty Redmond, despite getting picked on against Georgia, he has absolutely continued to grow week in and week out, and it wasn't necessarily a light bulb moment for the true freshman, but it's consistent growth that once again needs to show up against Vanderbilt on Saturday.
About the growth that he's had, but also what's coming in his future. I don't think there was one light bulb moment where it just clicked and triggered. I just think it's been constant growth from him throughout the course of the year.
But of course the pressure isn't just on Ty Redmond. Of course, I think Diego Pavia and the Commodores, what they have been so successful at this season is finding where the weakness is in that second and third level for defenses and exploiting it until they get stopped. A lot of the times they find a lot of success on the left side of the field. But that doesn't say that Colton Hood's not going to get in the mix. I mean, when I talked to him just a couple of weeks ago, the defensive back said, what I want to be remembered for, not only is that I gave my all for my teammates, but that maybe I win the Jim Thorpe Award. This is the last chance to really put some product on tape, whether it's the Jim Thorpe Award or other individual awards that they can earn throughout the season. This is the time to do that. And what gets me a little nervous with this matchup is when we look at how Tennessee's secondary has performed this season. I mean, they're giving up about 250 pass yards per game this season. Though in their last handful or a couple of SEC games, you could look at Oklahoma and Florida, they've given up less than 160 yards. So you have seen since the turn of where the defense has gotten better, that Oklahoma game, that they've really kind of been able to hold their own. Let's let New Mexico State with 300 passing yards be an anomaly in that regard. But for them to find a way to limit the explosive plays will absolutely be key because Diego Pavia will get his. He just can't get 12 for 300 yards. I think at that point, that'll be a really tough shootout that we'll see in this game. That's partly why ESPN bets, has the point total in the upper 60s. This could be a game where they're both scoring 30, 40 points, and with the spread being 2.5, this might likely turn out to be a shootout. And I think what ends up giving Tennessee the win is if the secondary can hold their own.
We got to match everything out, a lot of shift trade motion, got to communicate and play assignment sound, but a part of that is also applying pressure and not letting them sit back there and pat the football all day long too. And while you're doing that, he's got the ability to escape and make plays. We got to do a great job not letting them outside of the pocket too.
So I'd say the second key for Tennessee to win this game, it stays on defense. I think, again, like we mentioned with the ESPN bets, this is a game that will come down probably to a field goal difference. And for Tennessee to win, it has got to come with defensive stops, whether, like we mentioned, in the secondary, or I'm going to bring us up closer to the line of scrimmage for that defensive front for Tennessee, specifically with the edge rushers. Caleb Herring, Joshua Josephs, they have got to show up in ways that they haven't this season. They have had phenomenal efforts throughout the year, but they need to get home more than they have in each individual game up until this point. We could go to Texas specifically for Vanderbilt. Yes, Diego Pavia had 12 explosive plays. Yes, he nearly had 300 explosive yards, but he was also sacked 6 times. What Tennessee sees on tape in that game, they've got to find a way to replicate that here at home. Diego Pavia has had a much cleaner effort in the next 2 games, just 3 sacks across the last 2 games, but Tennessee has to find a way to get home like the Longhorns did against Diego Pavia for them to have success. They cannot afford for Diego Pavia to have a clean pocket. If he wants to roll out, it can't be on these designed rollouts where he has no one in front of him. They need to get pressure on Diego Pavia, whether it's those quarterback hurries off the blitz. They have got to find a way to make Diego Pavia uncomfortable in this game, because he does just fine trying to manipulate the pocket. He does fine throwing on the run, but where he might struggle is if Tennessee can get a hand in his face, if they can, almost get home, and if even better, if they can get home, that will certainly be the difference. A quick note on Joey Aguilar, though. What was really impressive about his efforts against Florida, which we kind of highlighted that on Sunday, was his decisiveness. That's what made him so effective against Georgia. That's what created so much excitement at the beginning of the season against Syracuse. When he is decisive, when he can deliver in tight windows, this is a very exciting offense. And where I think they're their best is when they do have a pace that is up-tempo. That's what worked so well against Georgia and again against Florida. They've got to find a way to replicate that against the Vanderbilt Commodores. They don't have one of the strongest defenses in the country either. There is certainly room, like there is against Tennessee's defense, to have success, to push the ball down the field. Of course, Joey has 3 viable options, specifically in the wide receiver room. And if Ethan Davis can perform the way he did, against Florida, you have 4 viable options down the field. And of course, getting your running backs involved, on those checkdowns or in the flat certainly gives him other opportunities. But, Joey certainly has to look how he did in those 2 games to have a chance. If this likely ends up being a back and forth game, Tennessee has to find ways to answer to what Vanderbilt does, right? Technically, they're the underdog. Technically, they're the slight favorite in this game, 58% chance to win as it opened on Monday. I'm not sure how much the line has changed here on Tuesday as I'm taping this, but certainly an interesting matchup when it comes to Joey Aguilar's perspective. And if you recall the interview I had with his JUCO head coach back in California, Mike Dauer, he tells me that Joey does his best when the lights are the brightest, when it's the biggest stage. So I'm curious to see how he'll look in this game, but in the 128-year history of this rivalry, this is the biggest game that we can identify. You could maybe go back to 1928 when General Neyland was the head coach. That was another big-time matchup within this series, but biggest rivalry matchup that pretty much anybody can ever remember. But what would you guys say your key to a victory for Tennessee is? Also, light ball Friday morning, 8:30. VFL Todd Kelly Jr. will have his squeeze, who his key matchup is. So you certainly won't want to miss that. And then on Saturday, all of our post-game reactions. Hopefully Tennessee is able to play spoiler to Vanderbilt, but should have all the fireworks, as Deshaun Bishop told me earlier this week. I'll talk to you guys again on Wednesday.